What is she doing with my daughter? Grant froze as he saw a strange woman tightly embracing his daughter in the middle of the playground, as if the girl belonged to her. For a moment, anger flared within him, then abruptly faded when he noticed Ivy, his daughter, trembling, tears streaming down her face, yet clinging to the woman like a lifeline in a storm. Grant, a millionaire who could buy anything, except that comfort. And in that moment he realized he had never truly known how to be a father. And that woman, who was she? Before diving into a story that will keep you glued to the screen, I have a small request. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love inspiring stories, and don't forget to leave a comment, letting me know, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you live? It always feels amazing to see the world come together just to share a meaningful moment. Beatrice Monroe was used to wringing her heart out like a damp cloth at the bottom of a bucket. She didn't have much to call luxurious, except patience. At 28, working part-time as a server at a high-end resort restaurant in Santa Barbara, Beatrice never imagined her life would be tethered to a place like this. Amid pristine white tablecloths, the scent of lavender sprayed in the air, and people who never worried about whether their money would last until the end of the month. Each morning began like a balancing act. Beyond her ever-present smile, she hid a whirlwind. Simple yet pressing worries, overdue rent, a delayed phone bill, and Aria, her 4-year-old daughter, staying at the neighbor's all morning, waiting for her mother with eyes Beatrice could never forget. But despite the chaos within, she went to work, still polite, still gently asking if guests wanted more bread, still bowing slightly when delivering the bill. In this place, she wasn't allowed to be tired. She wasn't allowed to worry. She wasn't allowed to be an exhausted single mother carrying the weight of life while trying not to let anyone see she was on the verge of breaking. And then, a small sound tore through that mask. A cry, sharp, like a needle piercing her chest. Beatrice looked up from table 7. No one else heard it, or if they did, they didn't care. She set down the cloth, left the tray of unwashed glasses, and hurried down the stone-paved path toward the playground. Her steps carried no reason, only instinct. The playground nestled between rows of palm trees and light oak benches, and there, on the soft rubber ground between a rope bridge and a large slide, was a little girl curled up, arms around her knees, trembling like a leaf. A bloody scrape glowed red on her left knee, her eyes wide and brimming with tears. Beatrice saw no adults around, no panicked parents rushing over, only her and the child. She knelt down, no loud questions, no haste. She approached gently, like a soft breeze. The girl glanced up, and in those eyes, Beatrice saw herself. Aria from yesterday, slipping in the bathtub. Herself as a child, left in rooms where no one truly cared. "It's okay," she whispered, like a fragile lullaby. The child didn't respond, but her trembling body hitched once, then reached out, clinging to Beatrice. The embrace came suddenly, unannounced. Small, desperate, but achingly honest. Beatrice wrapped her arms around her, her hands resting on the girl's slender back with all the steadiness she could muster. She didn't know who she was comforting, the girl or herself, the mother always wondering if she was good enough, present enough. The sea breeze blew through, carrying the scent of salt. The girl's hair fluttered lightly on Beatrice's shoulder. She heard the sobs soften, then break into uneven breaths. She patted the girl's back gently, whispering something indistinct. And then her eyes lifted, just in time to meet those of a man standing not far away. He wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his gaunt face framed by sunglasses. His hands froze at his sides, as if he'd forgotten how to move. His gaze locked on to her, not angry, not harsh, just stunned. He didn't approach. He just stood there, silent, watching the child in a stranger's arms, watching a scene he hadn't expected. His daughter, Ivy, finding safety in someone else, not him. Beatrice didn't know who the man was. She didn't need to. She only knew that in that moment a child needed to be held, and a mother, though not by blood, did the only thing that mattered most. She was there. And from a distance, a father seemed to realize he had just witnessed something that money, power, or provision could never buy. Grant Whitaker was not a man who liked others to see him grappling with emotions. Over a decade of building a career from nothing to America's leading online healthcare empire, he learned to control his body language, his facial expressions, even the reflexes of his heart. People like him weren't allowed to panic, much less show weakness. Yet in that moment, standing frozen in the sun-warmed, rubber-paved playground of the resort, watching his daughter tremble in the arms of a strange woman, Grant found himself with nowhere to hide. Ivy, his strangely independent daughter, was crying. Not the petulant cry of a child, but a panicked sob, as if the entire world had suddenly become unfamiliar and frightening. She didn't see him. She didn't run to him. She didn't call Dad like she usually did. She only buried her face in the shoulder of the server, the woman with a sand-streaked apron and disheveled hair, holding his daughter as if she had known her forever. Grant had seen many things: sick children fighting in ICU rooms, life and death numbers flashing on the monitors of the app he'd poured his life into building. But he had never felt as fragile as he did now. He, a celebrated millionaire, featured on the cover of Forbes, hailed as a genius of digital healthcare, stood motionless, like a teenager unsure how to handle his own emotions. He didn't approach right away. He didn't call Ivy's name. Instead, he stood there, an outsider, watching a simple moment he should have created but couldn't. That embrace, warm, resolute, unhurried, was something Ivy had never sought from him, from nannies, from tutors, from anyone in the chain of people he hired to make up for her needs. Perhaps because that embrace wasn't a duty, it was instinct. Something the woman did without thinking, without weighing, without expecting anything in return. And what surprised Grant most of all was that he didn't feel offended. He felt grateful. A year ago, he lost Grace, his gentle, profound wife, who had walked with him through the lean days when their company had 2 employees and an old laptop. She died from childbirth complications after Ivy was born, and since then, Grant buried his emotions deep. He didn't cry at the funeral. He didn't talk to anyone about it. He focused on expanding the company, hiring teams, buying a new house, investing in Ivy's future education, all the things people called securing his daughter's future. But he knew, and perhaps Ivy sensed it too, that what she needed wasn't an expensive private school or a qualified nanny. It was someone who, in the exact moment she fell, wouldn't ask, "Are you okay?" but would simply kneel down and hold her tight. And this morning, that person wasn't him. Grant stepped slowly toward them as Ivy's sobs began to subside. The woman was still there, her hand on the girl's back, whispering something he couldn't hear but enough to make Ivy stop crying and rest her forehead on the woman's shoulder, as if it were the softest pillow in the world. The woman's eyes lifted, meeting Grant's. For a brief second, Nothing was said, but he read in her gaze a calm certainty, not a trace of fear despite facing a stranger, the father of the child she held. She didn't apologize, she didn't explain, and that made him feel respect rather than irritation. She didn't need praise. She was simply doing what was right, naturally, as if it were her breath. Grant crouched down. Ivy looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed. He reached out, but she still clung to the woman's sleeve. That moment pierced his heart. It hurt, but it also awakened him. He knew then. He needed to learn how to be a father again. Not with logic, but with his heart. And if possible, he wanted to know who this woman was, not out of curiosity, but because she had just given his daughter something he hadn't dared admit he'd lost. At first, Grant thought it was just a coincidence. The first time he brought Ivy back to the restaurant was the next noon because she insisted on eating pancakes at the place from yesterday, where the nice lady with the cat-shaped bandage was. Grant smiled, thinking it was just a child's fleeting fancy. But then it happened again. Another day. And another. Each time Ivy led the way, running into the restaurant with eager eyes and untold stories. Beatrice was always there, behind the counter or carrying a tray of drinks, always in her simple demeanor, hair neatly tied, shirt slightly wrinkled from haste. But her eyes always sparkled, and when she saw Ivy, her face softened in a distinct way, as if she, too, was waiting for something tender in her long workday. Grant didn't explain why he didn't visit other restaurants in the resort. He had plenty of options, from Michelin-starred menus to private lakeside dining rooms. Yet he kept returning to this place, where his daughter's laughter rang out naturally, and where the woman Ivy always wanted to sit near was present. It started with quick greetings, then small questions. Did Ivy eat well today? Does she still like pink bandages? Then longer conversations, when Grant lingered a bit, sipped his coffee slowly, and listened to Beatrice talk about her daughter's favorite cake, how Arya used to fear thunder, and the nights she worked so late she missed kissing her daughter goodnight. Her stories weren't dramatic or self-pitying, but something in the way she spoke, simple, without complaint, peeled back layers of Grant's heart. The months he'd hidden behind a stoic facade, the first sleepless night after Grace's death, the times Ivy had a fever and he could only sit by her side, unable to offer a comforting word. He'd thought silence was strength. Now he began to understand. There were things children needed that effort or money couldn't replace. And Beatrice seemed to understand that better than anyone. She didn't try to impress or act all-knowing. She was simply fully present in every moment. When Ivy spoke, she listened with her eyes. When Grant offered a faint smile, she didn't ask why, but he knew she understood. Some afternoons, they'd meet by chance on the coastal path, where Ivy collected seashells and Beatrice took a break between shifts. They walked slowly together. No plans, no pretense. Ivy laughed loudly, holding a small, heart-shaped stone, offering it to Beatrice like a grand gift. Beatrice knelt to thank her, as if it were the most wondrous thing she'd ever received. And Grant, standing there, saw an image he thought was lost forever, a woman tilting her head to listen to his daughter, giving her the sense of safety he hadn't realized he'd left vacant for so long. Increasingly, he saw that the isolation he'd chosen, as a shield to protect Ivy from the world, was making her lonelier. A father's love wasn't enough if it came with the absence of maternal tenderness. And Beatrice, without trying, was providing exactly that, an unassuming care, a quiet warmth. He didn't know when his steps started seeking out that cafe as a habit. He didn't know when Ivy's eyes began to light up at the sight of her. And he didn't know when his heart, accustomed to a barren stillness, began to stir again, because of a woman who wore no makeup, but had a way of making an entire day feel lighter with just a nod and a genuine smile. Dear audience, take a moment to relax or grab a glass of water, then keep listening to the story. There are still surprises ahead. Comment 1 if you find the story captivating, so we know you're still with us. It began with fleeting glances that seemed incidental, a slight smile, a small laugh from behind the counter. Beatrice wasn't naive. She noticed the shift in the staff room's atmosphere. Gone were the friendly questions about Aria, the offers to swap shifts or share lunch portions. Instead, a glossy layer of silence coated every social interaction. She didn't ask. She didn't argue. But the whispers, though not spoken directly, found their way into her chest, like salt rubbed into an old, unhealed scar. They said she was trying her luck, that she, the single brunette waitress, was ensnaring a wealthy man, a millionaire, a chance to change her life, that every coincidental encounter was orchestrated, that her daughter, Aria, was just a prop in a pity play. Beatrice didn't blame them. People always found a sensational story easier to believe than the quiet struggle of a mother trying to survive with dignity. She was called into the office one Tuesday afternoon after a long morning shift. The manager, a sharp, middle-aged woman, impeccable in a beige suit, set her coffee cup down silently and spoke in a meticulously polite tone. "We understand your situation, Beatrice, but this is a high-end resort. Any personal interactions with guests, especially those of stature, must be controlled and professional. We hope you'll maintain a professional image." There was no scolding, no accusation, just a reminder. But to Beatrice, it felt like a wake-up call, or rather a vague warning about the imbalance in a relationship she hadn't even named. From that day, she deliberately kept her distance. She didn't turn when she heard familiar footsteps. She didn't glance at table 8, where Ivy would wave with a smile bright as sunlight. She didn't join the short seaside walks. She didn't linger longer than necessary. She no longer met Grant's warm gaze as she once had. She knew she was hurting them both, Grant and Ivy, but she didn't dare do otherwise, because she knew all too well what it meant to lose custody. Years ago, over a single unpaid bill, a spiteful neighbor reported to Child Protective Services that she was neglecting her child due to late-night shifts. The 3-week investigation was enough to plunge Beatrice into panic and fear. Aria was temporarily sent to a relative's home, and every night Beatrice slept, sitting up, clutching her phone as if a message could save her from the abyss. Though the matter was eventually cleared, she never forgot the feeling of losing control when her daughter's fate rested in others' hands. Now, with a man like Grant, a millionaire, a widowed father with a complex public profile, any misstep could be misinterpreted. A hug in the park, a glance held too long, repeated chance encounters, all could be twisted into reasons to question her fitness as a mother. And for Beatrice, no pain was greater than the possibility of losing Aria again. Nothing was worth that risk, not even the warmth of those seaside afternoons, not even Ivy's bright eyes calling her the nice lady. So she stepped back, gently, silently, without explanation. Only Ivy's gaze, bewildered and sad, was something Beatrice couldn't escape. And in a late night, standing alone in the empty kitchen washing glasses, she asked herself, was safety always worth more than happiness? Beatrice had never allowed herself to be vulnerable during work hours. For her, exhaustion, fear, or even tears had to wait until her shift ended, until the restaurant doors closed, until she could return to being a person, not a model employee. But that morning, her phone buzzed mid-shift, and just 3 words from the neighbor watching her child, "Liam, high fever," made her drop the tray of glasses without a second thought. Liam, her 6-year-old son with eyes just like hers, was the last piece of family she had. She rushed to leave mid-shift, hurried and clumsy, not bothering to remove her apron or wipe the sweat from her brow. Her mind held only the image of her son lying alone on their old sofa, face flushed, breathing heavily. As Beatrice burst through the back door, she didn't expect to see Grant standing there, waiting. Without lengthy questions, he simply opened his car door. "Get in," he said, his voice low as always, but his eyes quiet, non-judgmental. Beatrice started to refuse, out of reflex. But then she saw his gaze, not pitying, not overbearing, just the look of a man who had a child, who knew the feeling of a heart dropping at news of their illness. They drove in silence. Grant didn't ask for the address again. She didn't explain why she lived in a modest neighborhood on the east side of town, where car horns outnumbered birds and the old wooden stairs creaked with every step. But he didn't seem to care. He carried her bag of medicine and stepped into her small apartment with the caution of someone aware they were entering another's most private world. Liam lay curled up in bed, sweat soaking his hair. Beatrice knelt beside him, checking his forehead, murmuring disjointed words of comfort. Grant stood at the doorway, silently watching, not interfering, not disrupting that sacred moment between mother and son. When the boy fell back asleep, they retreated to the kitchen. The small kitchen held a scratched wooden table and two mismatched chairs. The fridge hummed softly, and the warm yellow light from the ceiling lamp made everything feel strangely intimate. Grant rolled up his sleeves, rummaged through her cabinets for dishes, and cooked a simple soup with whatever ingredients she had. Beatrice started to protest, but then let him continue. Not because she was tired, but because for the first time she felt she wasn't alone in this responsibility. When Liam woke to the aroma and Ivy sat beside him, coaxing spoonfuls with stories of seashells and kites, Beatrice stood in the corner of the kitchen, her heart quiet. Two children, one boy, one girl, one poor, one rich, laughed under her run-down roof as if they were born to belong together. After dinner with soup and sandwiches, when the calm returned, Grant said something she hadn't expected. "Beatrice, I'm starting a new project about mental health care for children after trauma. I need someone who truly understands it, someone who's lived it. Would you consider joining me?" Beatrice looked at him as if she didn't understand. Her, a woman once deemed unstable for her single-parent past, once seen as a risk of losing custody, a part-time worker with no degree, being asked by a millionaire to lead a project for healing? She stayed silent for a long time, not out of doubt about his intentions, but because she had never imagined life could open such a path, not from hope, but from trust. She didn't answer right away. But in her eyes, something cracked open, something warmed. Perhaps for the first time in years, Beatrice began to allow herself to imagine a different life. One without running, without bowing her head, and maybe a place to truly start again. Please take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps me keep bringing you stories that make your heart race. Beatrice didn't answer that day. But 3 days later, as Grant prepared to head to his new office in Pasadena, he received a message with just 4 words. "I'll try, okay?" No emojis, no exclamation marks. But for Grant, it was enough to brighten a long, stressful day. Moving to Pasadena wasn't easy for Beatrice, not because of the distance, but because of the boundaries within her, between her past and present, between surviving and allowing herself to live. The new house in Pasadena sat on a quiet street, shaded by maple trees drooping over the front steps. Not extravagant, but filled with light. An old swing stood in the backyard, and the living room window opened to a sapphire sky each morning. Beatrice and Liam moved in on a pale, golden afternoon. No one made a fuss to welcome them. Only Ivy stood at the gate with 2 glasses of orange juice and a whisper, "You're here. I've been waiting forever." From that day, the 2 children became inseparable. They went to school together, came home together, studied at the same desk, shared a bed on weekends. Some evenings, Ivy and Liam's laughter echoed in the kitchen as they fought over dishwashing, splashing water on Beatrice's apron, while Grant, from the balcony, watched quietly, filled with gratitude. Beatrice was no longer the waitress from his initial memory. She was now the heartbeat of the house, the one who knew when to play soft music at dinner, when a hug needed to linger, when Ivy felt uneasy without saying so. She didn't change to fit this family. She was simply herself, and somehow, her presence made the house fuller than any expensive furniture could. Grant felt it in the smallest details. Like the morning he woke early for a presentation, finding coffee already brewed and a note on the table. "You'll do great today. I believe in you." Or the times Beatrice came home late from work but still sat by Ivy, finishing the story left unread from the night before. Or on Sundays, when Grant lingered longer in the backyard armchair, just to hear Beatrice tell an old story about the time she and Liam got soaked in the rain, laughing in the middle of the street. She brought life to a house he once thought only needed stability. And then he understood. What he'd been missing wasn't order or success. It was softness, empathy. The presence of a woman without makeup who could see a child's fear without anyone saying a word. Beatrice didn't try to be Ivy's mother, but she became an indispensable part of her life, slowly, patiently, honestly. And Liam, after a week of adjustment, began calling Grant Uncle G. Not because Grant asked, but because the boy chose it as a natural trust. During one Saturday dinner, as the family gathered around the table with slightly burnt lasagna that Ivy and Liam praised like a culinary masterpiece, Grant sat quietly among the three, a strange feeling rising. Not explosive happiness, but a calm like water seeping into soil after rain. He said nothing that night. But as Beatrice cleared dishes in the kitchen, Grant stood behind her, silently thinking that, if one day he found the courage, he would hold her hand for a long time and say, "Thank you for turning this house into a home." That night, the Pasadena sky held no fireworks. Only a gentle breeze and the faint scent of cinnamon drifted from the kitchen, where two children giggled, vying to hang the largest ornament on the highest branch of the Christmas tree. The living room glowed softly with golden light, each small detail wrapped in a warm blanket of memory. Scattered wrapping paper, half-baked cookies, and a classical tune whispering from an old speaker in the corner. Grant stepped into the kitchen, pouring 2 mugs of hot cocoa, each topped with whipped cream, just as Ivy liked. He said nothing as he handed Beatrice a mug, only nodded, as if they'd agreed beforehand in a wordless language. She understood, gently taking it, her fingers brushing his. Warm, unhurried. They stepped onto the back balcony. Outside was a rare stillness, where the city paused its noise, and the stars, though sparse, were enough to illuminate things long left unnamed. Grant leaned against the railing, still holding his mug. He didn't look directly at her when he spoke. His voice was low, steady, but carried a truth that made the listener's heart soften. "I love you." No flourish, no repetition, no roses or ring in a velvet box. Just 3 words, ordinary as breath, but heavy with everything he'd learned from her. About resilience, about hurt, about loving not to possess, but to touch. He turned to look at her. The breeze swept Beatrice's hair aside, revealing a face listening with her whole heart. Her eyes held no surprise, no tears, no dramatic reaction like in the movies, only the calm of a woman used to not expecting too much. And so, when it came, she knew how to receive it with full reverence. Grant lowered his voice, slow, as if writing a vow that needed no oath. "I want you here. In this life, in this family, not because I need you to fill a void, but because, since you came, those voids are no longer something I fear." Beatrice stayed silent. She looked into the living room, where Ivy and Liam were drawing colored paper stars, clumsily sticking them to the tree's branches. Both laughed loudly as the tree tilted slightly. No one cared about perfection. They were just living, together. She saw her son's small hand grasp Ivy's as they climbed onto a chair. She saw trust, ease, presence. Beatrice turned back, her eyes meeting Grant's. The eyes of a man who'd been broken, who'd lost so much, but still had the courage to choose love again, not with promises, but with actions. With every morning he brewed coffee. Every night he wiped her son's fevered brow. Every time he stayed silent to let her be vulnerable. She didn't agree right away. She didn't nod. She didn't say yes. Instead, she stepped closer, placing her hand on his, still holding the mug, and whispered, as if it were obvious, "I'll choose your hand. Every day." No applause. No ring slipping onto her finger. Just two adults who'd walked through quiet lives, now choosing to stand together. Not out of lack, not out of need, but because they'd realized, in a messy world, the greatest miracle is finding someone calm enough to walk with. Under the old porch, where the Christmas tree's lights still twinkled dreamily, their story didn't end like a fairy tale. It was just beginning. And this time, a true beginning. In life, sometimes the most beautiful things don't come from dramatic turns, but from quiet choices made every day. Choosing to trust again. Choosing to forgive yourself. Choosing to love, not with promises, but with steady, silent actions. Beatrice and Grant's story isn't a fairy tale. It's a real journey, with real pain and a very real love. A love born from broken pieces, yet gentle enough to form a home. If you've ever felt unworthy, if you've ever feared your past would rob you of chances, remember, miracles can come when you dare to love with a heart that's been broken. Thank you for watching this journey to the end. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and leave a comment about a moment when you felt healed. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss the next stories, where every act of love brings us closer to the gentlest version of ourselves.